Right. Well, it's like being in a high deductible plan versus a plan that is only copays, right?
Right.
So if a bill came in, to your point, you might not get as many bills if you're on a copay plan where it's 25 bucks every single time you go to a doctor, no
Right.
matter what it is, versus it is whatever the bill is until you've reached your deductible. Like you just end up, I feel like I scrutinize those bills now like my Amex receipt. I'm
Right.
like, did I really do that? Did I buy
Yes.
did I buy those?
Welcome, listeners. Today we're speaking to Jill. We've been coworkers for nearly a decade, no big deal. She's hilarious, easy to work with, and always brings a sense of practicality to everything she does. Jill has 24 years experience in customer service roles and has spent 15 years in the health insurance industry. She currently manages Nova's customer service teams. She enjoys the people she gets to work with and talk to every day.
Jill, welcome to the podcast. Thank
Thank,
you so much for agreeing to do this.
thank you. Happy to be here.
So before we hopped on together with Jolene, we shared 3 questions with you. What is something you've learned that's been so helpful you tell everyone about it? What have you learned because something went so badly that you want to warn others? And given what you do, what do your friends and family always come to you for advice about? And you picked one, so I'm going to ask, what is something you've learned that has been so helpful you want to tell everyone about it?
Well, there's lots to choose from, but I would say one of the most questions that we get in customer service, and I get personally on a personal level, is I received this in the mail. I don't know what it is. Can you help me? Or I got a bill. Do I have to pay it? So, from a customer service standpoint, we have to work through those phone calls. Personally, I can handle that myself because it's usually just my mother or my father asking me how to interpret something, or my husband, either way. But from a customer service standpoint, we have to be sure that we're able to properly decipher what the person is calling about so that we're still giving them a great customer service experience, but not making it seem like they don't understand anything. So I always go back to reading is important and words are important. Read to me what you're looking at so we can help you understand what that is. Is it an
Right.
EOB? If it is, yes, great. We still want you to look at that, read it, because those words and numbers are important and will then bump up against the potential bill you then may get from your provider, which also important to look at, read the words, read the numbers, and understand, because sometimes the bill does come in incorrectly and you need to call then and figure out why. But you have to have a fundamental understanding of what you're looking at before you know if something looks wrong to even call to question.
Does that usually come when someone gets a bill, or is it more often that you'll get a call or, questions from your family around, like, I have an EOB with a balance. What am I supposed to do? Do you get more calls around the bills or around the EOBs?
Um, Personally, it's more bills. I think I've finally tutored them into what an EOB looks like. Um, and as my parents got older, they have way, way more doctor's appointments than they ever had. So the EOBs are very fast and
Flying in.
furious. They come flying in. So they're used to seeing them, but they're also not. So it's different too, right? So when you're not on a high deductible plan, your bills are very simple or they don't exist,
Right.
especially if you're Medicare, a commercial HDHP plan. It's the self-funded and high deductible plans that can get confusing,
Right.
because then you have to get into the conversations of first EOB versus bill. And then if it translates to, oh, yes, that is a bill you're looking at, and it's confusing, there's a lot of explanation that has to come with that, right? Because it could be a bill where they met their deductible, so the numbers look wonky. It could be a variety of
Right.
things. It's not as cut and dry as what my parents get, because my parents aren't in a high deductible plan. And it's
Well, that high
important to,
deductible plan, that makes you pay attention to the bills.
right. And one of the fundamental things we learned when we first started learning about self-funded and high deductible healthcare is that you need to be in charge of your own healthcare. So you need to learn to be okay asking the questions, because it's not anything people are used to, and it's completely different.
No, it does. It does feel different. Like I read the cable bill when it comes in. You look at those, and if something's off, you would absolutely call. But I feel like there's more hesitancy because you don't know what all those codes mean, even to call
Right.
and question.
Yep.
What is this and why am I getting charged for it? But once
Yes.
once you're responsible for it until that deductible is met, those numbers matter a little bit differently.
They do, right? And it's like you're looking at it and you're like, oh, it's so confusing. I'll just trust that they know what they're doing and I'm just going to pay it.
Right. But
And
they're humans.
sometimes, right. And sometimes, sometimes the providers will bill incorrectly. Billing offices will bill incorrectly. It's not intentional, but it happens.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid to ask the questions, but make sure you have enough of an understanding of what you're looking at so you know what should trigger you to ask that question. Which is why it's important, even from a customer service standpoint, when we're handling those phone calls, is that we have to be able to explain it to someone in a way that they then understand what they're looking at, to potentially then have to go back to their provider and explain it to them the way we just did.
Right.
To then tell them what has to happen. Or we offer to do that for the member a lot of times. Say, hey, we'll give the provider a call. You can stay on the line so they can kind of hear the conversation that's going on.
I'm listening and I'm thinking about a marketing flyer we created forever ago that we probably need to update, but it's like top 10 member FAQs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is next in line outside of EOBs, which I know is a popular one? Like what else? Now I'm curious, like what else do they ask you about when they call in?
Oh, well, it depends. It depends too on line of business. So if depending on if there's campaigns being offered in one area and not another, or different incentives being offered, or there's an incentive offered on the commercial side but not on the self-funded side, but your neighbor is a commercial neighbor and you have a self-funded plan and you're at the bonfire having a couple of beverages. Not sure why you're not talking about more fun things than what Matthew received, but we've actually had calls where people are like, but my neighbor got this incentive, so where's mine? And we have to then get into this whole explanation of different
kind of plan.
Yeah. Things are different.
Right. Well, it's like being in a high deductible plan versus a plan that is only copays, right? So
right.
If a bill came in, to your point, you might not get as many bills if you're on a copay plan where it's $25 every single time you go to a doctor,
right.
no matter what it is, versus it is whatever the bill is until you've reached your deductible. Like you just end up, I feel like I scrutinize those bills now like my Amex receipt.
Right.
I'm like, did I really do that? Did I buy
Yes.
did I buy those things?
Right. I'll tell you what though, like having, and this is going to sound terrible, and not that I'm imposing like ill will or health on anybody, but having like a major like surgery or something really helps, right? So I broke my ankle in July, had to have surgery. Well, I knew I was meeting my deductible as of July 23rd. So once I knew I was past that, then I wasn't as focused anymore on checking the bills when they came in, other than to know I was just paying a copay at that point. So it's knowing it's understanding what you're looking at, but first having to understand that the plan you're in and what happens throughout your plan year as you go to appointments and doctors and pick up prescriptions and all that stuff. And then it's just knowing at any point where you stand in that plan to know what you should expect.
Right. Yeah, if you're a 1/1, so if you renew January 1, if you're still dealing with stuff in December, I always get real nervous about heading into January. I'm like, the date's closing. We gotta close this up by 12/31 because I'm starting a new deductible year.
I'm telling you, I said to my husband the other day, I'm like, get your new CPAP, get that taken care of. I had to get EpiPens refilled for my son. They were $400 and something before I had met my deductible. Now my deductible's met. It was like a $25 copay. I'm like, EpiPens for everybody. everybody gets an EpiPen.
I think that's helpful. I do. I think a lot of people I think high deductible plans. So first, the understanding EOB and a bill and the value of looking at the bill, and then sort of having that awareness and confidence to ask questions about the bill, because that's not something, you're right, that I feel like people are comfortable with because it's not something you had to do before. It was $25 copay and you just sort of walked away from it. But with so many employers offering plans now that are high deductible, until you've met that copay, you really are, like, it really does feel like, where's my money going?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if you've got, more than just yourself and you're covering your family, then you're watching, all different bills come in and how it's affecting your deductible. So yeah, it can be a lot. So it's just, not to say not to trust your providers and their billing, but always be aware.
Oh yeah.
Read
it the same way you would analyze any other bill before it went out the door.
Right.
Or you might question, why was my light bill so high? Or I didn't realize getting a pool was going to impact the water bill that much.
Right. We've had members call where we have gotten a bill from a provider and it's for services that were not even rendered for them. It's a mistake on the biller side. Like they transposed the number, whatever. It came through as a different member. That member got the bill. They're like, I wasn't there that day. But had that person not paid any attention to it and tossed it out, it would just keep going in the wrong direction.
Right.
Well, I think the lesson to this episode is PSA, do not talk about health insurance around a campfire with your neighbors. unless you're talking about this awesome Under the Coverage podcast. Then it's okay.
Agreed. I like that.
Good stuff, Joe. Awesome
Thanks.
stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us. You're a treasure trove of knowledge.
Thanks for having me. This was delightful.
This podcast is brought to you by Nova Healthcare Administrators. Why did they let us do this? Because at the end of the day, every Nova associate is driven to do what is right. We want what's best for our clients and their members, and we do a great job sharing what we learn with each other. Between our colleagues and business partners, we know a lot of kind, smart, and thoughtful people who we convince to share their tips with you.
Yes, all of that. And don't forget to leave a review, give us a like or subscribe, but more importantly, share. We'll find the insiders, you share it with the outsiders. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much wherever you're finding podcasts these days.